Okay, welcome everybody. I'm delighted to see you all here today. You're very welcome to this Belfast Summer School lecture. And I'm super excited, as I've just already told Caroline, I'm so excited to introduce Caroline, to host Caroline for this talk today. Um, a little bit about Caroline, if you don't already know. So Caroline was born in London. I didn't know that, and grew up in California. She studied classics at Berkeley, then won a scholarship to Newnham College, Cambridge, where she studied classical art and archaeology. She has a master's in Hebrew and Jewish studies from UCL and has taught Latin, French, and art at a London primary school. But you may know her for her writing. The Thieves of Ostia was published in 2001. This was the first of a 17-book series called The Roman Mysteries, which later became a BBC TV series. Caroline has won the Classical Association Prize for a significant contribution to the public understanding of classics. And amongst her other publications, there's a series of children's books set in Roman Britain called The Roman Quests. And most recently, my favorites actually, The Time Travel Diaries, which feature a teenage boy who travels back to Roman London. And then in the next book, he has adventures in Athens and he meets Plato. So it's wonderful. I can highly recommend those to both adults and young people. So thank you, Caroline, for coming today, and I'm going to pass over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a real treat to be here. I can't tell you, I must give you a little caveat, a little warning first. This is going to be a big nerdy lecture. I am a nerd. I'm a nerd about three things. I'm a nerd about classics, I'm a nerd about storytelling, and I'm a nerd about movies. And also, I'm used to speaking to kids in middle school and primary school. So please excuse me if it sounds like I'm talking down to you at any time. However, my mentality is an 11-year-old mentality, so that makes it useful for when I'm wanting to write books for kids. So I'm going to share my screen and hope it works. And here we go. I've called this talk Myth, Movies, and Storytelling. And here are a few of the books I've written. I think I've written now about 45 books in the past 25 years. This is where I'm sitting now in my Riverside flat in London. Yay. I've written 17 plus Roman mysteries, as Helen kindly said, and they televised them. And because I love movies and TV so much, this was one of the highlights of my life, when they actually took a story I'd come up with in my head and made it into a TV show. And they filmed it in Tunisia, Malta, and Bulgaria quite a while ago, 2006. You can see from the clapperboard there. I didn't actually go to Malta, but the kids who played the characters did and had lots of fun. I actually got to go to Bulgaria for this filming of the second season. That was huge fun. I'll never forget the night I arrived in Tunisia when they were filming the first series, and they drove me to my hotel, and this was it, right on the coast. Amazing. And the next morning they said, you're going to meet some of the actors, and they took me to a little white van, and there were the kids who played Flavia and Lupus, Francesca Isherwood and Harry Stott. And we got in this little van and we drove across the beach, across some kind of scrubland. And as we got closer to the coast, I saw all these tents and trailers and vans, and I realized that this is where a bunch of grown-ups had come to fly to North Africa to make my books into movies, into a TV series, which was amazing to me. That, again, something I dreamed up in my head. All these grown-ups were, and money had been spent, costumes, props, directors, cameramen, assistant cameramen, all that stuff. And even, of course, there were the makeup truck. Um, there's the makeup truck where they made all the characters up, the actors having fun there. And they had even a trailer where they had lessons when they weren't filming because they have to carry on their lessons. So that was huge fun. And then they took me to the set and they built these amazing stairs going down in a little Roman boat you can see there. So this was absolutely fantastic. And some of the images in my talk are taken from the filming of the TV series. It's available on DVD. It used to be on streaming. It might hopefully come back on streaming. And at the time, it was the most expensive children's TV show ever done in Great Britain, which did not guarantee that it was a success. For various reasons, it totally flopped. But never mind. I got a lot of good photos out of it. I've also written Roman mystery scrolls for younger kids, age 7+. I've retold 2 stories from Virgil's Aeneid. These are standalone stories because everyone dies at the end. The story of Nisus and Euryalus and of Camilla. That was good fun. Virgil can't sue me. He's been dead 2,000 years. I've written some books called The Roman Quest, which is a kind of 4-book series that comes after the Roman mysteries and is about a completely different set of kids, but they actually meet characters from the Roman mysteries who've grown up. So that was fun. And I set that in Roman Britain. I've written a book modestly called How to Write a Great Story with all my best tips and tricks and fantastic illustrations by Lindsay Hunter. And I'll be telling you some of my tricks this afternoon. This is the time travel books that Helen kindly said she enjoyed, and I had fun writing these too. I've written a story collaborating with Andrew Wallace Hadrill, Mr. Herculaneum, Sophie Hay, Miss Pompeii, and Laura Jenkinson Brown, as well as other scholars, about a real slave who became a freedman in Pompeii based on archaeological evidence. That was fun. I've written also I've done a new translation of Aesop's Fables, which is where learning Latin and Greek can come in handy. And coming in September, I've got an illustrated handbook to the Greek gods and goddesses, kind of a guidebook, compendium, yeah. And this was huge fun and has been brilliantly illustrated by Flora Kirk. And I kind of simplify, it's a kind of primer for the Greek gods and goddesses. When I go into schools, I tell kids, be careful what you read. A book could change your life. And there were 2 books that changed my life. One of them was this novel, this historical novel by Mary Renault called The Last of the Wine, set in ancient Greece. And you know, I first read it on my gap year 50 years ago, and it utterly gripped me. And I read it last month again. I've read it a few times in between, and it's even more impressive now that I've been studying classics for 50 years. Absolutely genius book. I read that book on my gap year. I was in Switzerland in a chalet with nothing to do, and my parents sent me a couple of books to read. And the other book they sent me was Homer's Iliad. And that was amazing too. I couldn't believe that something composed so long ago could sound so modern. And I still love to listen to the Iliad, and I listen to all the different translations. I love Emily Wilson's new translation, but I think my favorite is the one by Stephen Mitchell, read by Alfred Molina, who played Doc Octopus in one of the Spider-Man films. And in a way, listening to it on audio is kind of closest to the way it was meant to be taken in, as an audio, as a story told. It's just so brilliant. And because of those 2 books, because of this one and this one, when I got back to America, I signed up at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, for a beginner's classical Greek class and fell in love with it. And I'll never forget when I first saw Greek. It's like a code or a puzzle, and it's like black worms crawling on white. And then you can begin to decipher it, and suddenly you can pronounce the words, and suddenly you understand them. And it's like a window being opened into the past because you are now in the head of someone who lived 2,000+ years ago, which is extraordinary. And of course, the Iliad, as you all know, was composed before writing was really even invented or adapted and then written down. And I love the fact that in many epics, the first word is the theme of the whole epic. And the first word here, of course, is Mainen, rage. Mainen aedetheia peleado Achilleos. Sing the rage goddess of Achilles, son of Peleus. So yeah, if you can, if you get a chance and you haven't already, learn Greek, learn Latin, such a window into the past. I fell in love with the world of ancient Greece, and I fell in love especially with the vase paintings. all the artwork, the frescoes, the sculptures, but especially Greek vases, which are masterpieces. And this is considered by some to be the great masterpiece of all Greek art. It's here in London in the British Museum, and it shows Achilles killing. I wonder if any of you know who he's killing. I often ask kids, why is this character painted white when most of the vases at this period have black figures? The glaze is black and you incise in it. And of course, I'm sure you all know the reason that this character is painted white is she's a woman. It's Penthesilea, the queen of the Amazons. And this shows an incident not from the Iliad, from one of the other epics, of Achilles at the moment he kills her. You can see his sword going into her neck. Their eyes lock and they fall in love. Amazing story. An amazing vase by Exekias, painted around 535 in the British Museum. And I go to the British Museum at least a couple of times a month and just look at the vases. And there are myths like these, but also scenes of daily life, massive rooms full of vases from Greece and Italy. And this shows two young men, about 15 or 16, wearing what they would wear to school in ancient Greece, which is a blanket and nothing else. Many chances for fashion mishaps to occur there. And they're standing either side of a stele or an altar. And if you can read Greek, you can read Heracles there, Hercules. So I love the world of ancient Greece. And then they said to me when I was at Berkeley studying Greek, well, if you like ancient Greek, you have to do Latin. We call it classics. So I started doing Latin and fell in love with that too. And of course, learning these languages, there's no substitute. You don't have to know them anymore to go to study at university, but I cannot recommend enough learning the ancient languages. It really is a window into the past. And people often ask me, which do you prefer, Greece or Rome? And I say, well, I started out liking Greece first, but I think I like the Romans better. They're a bit more like us. Even before I became obsessed with the worlds of Greece and Rome and classics, I loved the Greek myths, and I especially loved movies based on the Greek myths. And this is one of the great films, although it's a very old film from 1963. It's Jason and the Argonauts, and it has that amazing stop motion Ray Harryhausen animation. If you're teachers and you have kids, I highly suggest that you show this to them. It's huge fun. There's Zeus in the center, and you can just see that's a little Jason standing right there on the table. And there's Juno, or Hera, I should say, played by Honor Blackman, who was Pussy Galore in Dr. No, I believe it was. So I love these films. Now here's a little self-test. See how good you are at identifying heroes. Can you tell who this hero is? I won't be asking you to put it in the chat. Just see if you can come up with the name. We can tell who he is. First of all, there's the heroic nudity that shows he's a hero. He's not got any clothes on. He's got a mentor there. She's wearing a helmet, holding a spear and an aegis with the Gorgonean on it, the Gorgon, the Medusa's face. And he's going for a ram or a fleece. So of course you all know it's Jason and Athena. And I love this. This is a great vase. I love it. And actually in the new Pantheon book, Flora Kirk has done a brilliant illustration of Jason. Now, Jason was a hero who got a lot of friends together, a lot of other heroes, and they went on a quest on the Argo. They're called the Argonauts. And I was thinking, now what films are a bit like Jason and the Argonauts, a hero with a lot of sidekicks? And in 1999, when The Matrix first came out, I thought, that's Jason and the Argonauts, because you've got a chosen hero who gets lots of helpers and goes to another amazing world. Although it's also based a lot on Neoplatonism. But the fact that one of the boat they go on, a kind of boat, is called the Argo is a dead giveaway. There's a lot of Greek mythology built into the Matrix, and he's a kind of Jason character. Okay, here's another hero. He's the one on the left. The monster is in the middle, and the mentor god is on the right. Again, you can identify him by his attributes. He's got a helmet of invisibility. He's got shoes that fly. He's got a special sword. He's looking away from the monster. The monster is the giveaway. You all know that the monster is Medusa. So that's got to be Perseus, Medusa, and the mentor Hermes. And now Perseus works alone, but he's got a lot of gadgets. The gods each give him something to work with. So he gets the helmet of invisibility from Hades, he gets the flying shoes from Hermes, although everybody in that vase has the flying shoes. Oh, by the way, here's Flora's illustration, which is even better than my kind of fuzzy photo. That's so great, isn't it? He's got the sword, the bag to put the head in. Now, can you think of any modern movie heroes who are loners but have lots of gadgets? And I bet you can. You might think of Batman or Inspector Gadget or James Bond. So again, it's a kind of borrowing from the Greek myths. Here's another hero from a black figure vase, which are generally earlier than the red figures. And again, you can tell who he is by who he's killing. And this hero, who is, of course, Theseus, has some gadgets and some helpers. And one of his main tools or weapons or talisman is his father's sword. And for that reason, he reminds me, oh, there's Flora's wonderful illustration of Theseus and the Minotaur. He reminds me a bit of Luke Skywalker from
At the top.
one of my favorite films, which is Star
Yes.
Wars. So yeah, there's the hero with the talisman, lots of gadgets. Okay, who's this hero? This is again another vase in the British Museum, which has so much there. I think it's a hydria. Shows a guy tied to a mast with some sirens flying around. Of course, you know it's Odysseus. And here's Flora's lovely illustration of Odysseus escaping from the Cyclops cave. Now, I'll bet you can think of a movie that's based on the Odyssey. And that's one, which even has some sirens on the rocks. But there are quite a few that, as you're watching them, you think, hey, that's based on the Odyssey. And this film from 2005, I don't know if you've ever seen it with Bill Murray, he's like had a letter that says his son is searching for him. So he goes on a road trip, on a journey, and visits all his ex-girlfriends and he finishes up with his ex-wife, who I think is named Penny, and she's got a lot of suitors hanging around. It's a motorcycle gang because it's set in modern times. So look out for some of these mythic beats. And my mentor, the screenwriter who taught me the most about writing, John Truby, he said that the best stories and films have a myth embedded in them. So look out for those embedded myths. Many filmmakers use the story Pygmalion, who, of course, was a Phoenician king from Greek mythology who created his ideal woman. He sculpted her and he prayed to the goddess of love, Aphrodite, that she might come alive. And in this not ancient painting, but it's quite fun. It shows her feet are still marble, but as he kisses her, she's beginning to come alive. And there are tons of movies. If you want to take the Pygmalion myth, it's often the transformation film where someone makes a woman or a man into their ideal partner. And here are at least 10 movies I've thought of based on the Pygmalion myth, which is so much fun, ranging from My Fair Lady, based on the play Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw in about 1902, up to modern times, Ex Machina, things like that. Ruby Sparks is about an author who writes his ideal woman, and he comes down the next day to get some breakfast, and there she is. Achilles is our great hero, of course, of the Greeks. And you all know the story that he was invulnerable because when he was a baby, his mother took him by his little heel and dipped him in the river Styx, and wherever the water touched him, he became invulnerable, all except for his heel. And of course, again, this isn't in the Iliad, it's in one of the other epics that goes with the Trojan cycle. He is killed with a poisoned arrow by Paris, who was a Trojan fighting against the Greeks. And I don't know if you were like me, but when I first heard that myth, I thought, why didn't his mother swish him around in the water and get him wet all over? But now that I'm a writer, I know why. If you have a hero who's invulnerable, you must give them a weakness. Otherwise, they'll win every battle. There will be no suspense. So you must give your hero an Achilles heel, which is why, of course, the makers of Superman, who's also invulnerable, invented kryptonite or created kryptonite, the glowing green stone from his home planet that makes him weak. Otherwise, Lex Luthor would never have a chance to beat Superman. If you have an ordinary hero who's human, my favorite hero is the detective, the hero who uses his brain rather than his superpowers or strength. If you have a hero who's human, you don't really need to give them an Achilles heel because they're human. They can be shot or pushed off a building or off the Reichenberg Falls or whatever. But it's always good to give them an Achilles heel because that makes them three-dimensional and interesting. And often their weakness, the flip side, is their strength. And of course, Sherlock Holmes is brilliant, but he's also, I think, probably slightly on the spectrum and not very good at socializing. And of course, he also has a drug problem, according to Conan Doyle, at least. He's addicted to cocaine or something similar. If your hero doesn't have any weakness and are practically perfect in every way, screenwriters call that a traveling angel. They drop into the story, fix everything that's wrong, and then they go away again. So they're a perfect hero. And one of my favorite heroes when I was young were the Nancy Drew mystery stories. Now, Nancy is pretty much perfect. She doesn't have any flaws or things haunting her from the past. She's not dealing with any inner demons. She's just an 18-year-old high school student in America who solves crimes. And she's great. I love those stories. They're very empowering. She has an absent-minded dad, and her mother is sadly dead, but her housekeeper is essentially a mother she can boss around. So it's kind of the best of all worlds. I fell in love with these books and adored them. And in about 1999, my sister said to me, "Why don't you write a book for kids set in Pompeii?" And I immediately thought, I had a light bulb moment. I thought I could do Nancy Drew in ancient Rome because I love the world of ancient Rome. I love Nancy Drew. If I did a kind of mashup, my girl hero couldn't be 18 like Nancy because she'd be married with about 3 kids because, of course, the legal age of marriage in ancient Rome is 12. So that's how I came up with Flavia Gemina, Detectrix, the girl detective. And she's only 10 in the first book, but of course, 10 is essentially the new 14 because you could get married at 12. And she's really, really clever. She's a detective. She doesn't have superpowers, just her brain. I like a detective because any of us could be a detective. And at first I thought I'd have her live in Pompeii, like my sister suggested. And then I thought, no, I'd better have her just visit Pompeii, because obviously, if she goes to Pompeii, it's got to be when the volcano erupts and then she can go home again. At first I thought I'd have her live in Rome. And then I thought, no, Ostia, the seaport of Rome, which is my favorite ancient site in the Mediterranean. And of course, you all know that Italy is the country shaped like a giant thigh-high boot kicking the football of Sicily. Rome is on the knee, but a bit inland. Ostia is right on the knee, or used to be. It's also now a bit inland, but that's my favorite ancient site. Something magical about it. So it was great fun to set my books there and have to go there and do lots of research. So here's Flavia and her dad from the TV series. Now I knew I had a girl detective. I knew I had my setting, Ostia, and it would be around the time of the eruption of Vesuvius. So I've got 79 AD, which I discovered was during the Flavian emperors. You've got Vespasian, Titus, people like that. I now needed to come up with a plot. I'm good at doing description and the setting, but I wasn't so good at plot. And I discovered Hollywood screenwriters. They write the best plots, and they talk about something called the hero's journey, a story where a hero must go on a quest to find a prize, achieve a goal, or save a life. But the important thing is what they learn at the end. And so I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that, steal some Hollywood screenwriting plot structure to get the kids to keep reading. And here is, if you Google monomyth or hero's journey, you'll come up with a diagram like this that shows the hero, and they get a call to it. They have a problem and a desire. They get a call to adventure. They often refuse the call, but someone, usually a mentor, a wise older person, convinces them to go. They then leave their ordinary world and go into the world of adventure. And lots of things happen there. They meet helpers, they undergo tests and training. About halfway through, they get to their lowest moment. They go to the underworld, sometimes literally, if it's a Greek myth. And then they fight a battle. They might fight it there or a little bit later. Whether they win or lose the battle, they learn something, get the prize maybe, and then they return home back to where they started, but they're now changed. They've learned who they're meant to be. So the first line of my first book, The Thieves of Ostia, which is still my best-selling book, um, I've just finished doing a writing course for writing for children, and I say in your first line, if you can, tell us where we are, who our hero is, what type of genre the book is, and I've done that in the first line. Flavia Gemina solved her first mystery on the Ides of June in the 10th year of the Emperor Vespasian. I've told you who it's about, a girl or a woman. We find out on the next page it's a girl, Flavia Gemina. Solved her first mystery. It's a detective story. And then words like Ides of June and Emperor tell you it's in the Roman world. And I used a special plot formula to write the first chapter where it starts off, well, she'd always had a knack for finding things her father misplaced, his best toga, his cool pen, and once even his ceremonial dagger. But this time there'd been a real crime with a real culprit. And the crime was her father has lost his signet ring. He was signing some documents, using the ring to seal the documents with dripped wax or maybe press it into a wax tablet. He went to the latrine. When he came back, the ring was gone. Who could have stolen it? Flavia looks for clues using all her senses, all five senses, and on one of the pieces of parchment, she sees a mark like an inky bird footprint. And she thinks, bird, aha. She goes into her inner garden, and sure enough, in the branches of one of the trees, she sees a magpie. And like you, she knows that magpies like bright, shiny things. And she thinks, I'll bet he stole the ring, but his beak is empty. He must have taken it to his nest and he's come back for more. So she comes up with a clever plan to get him to lead her to his nest. She takes off a silver chain around her neck, puts it on her dad's desk in a beam of sunshine, hides behind a column, and waits to see if the magpie will take the bait. Sure enough, the magpie flies down, grabs the chain, and flies off over the back wall of her house. Flavia runs to the back door, opens it, and hesitates because one step over the threshold will take her not just out of her house, but out of the whole town, because her back wall of her house is the town wall of Ostia. And her dad has told her never to go out there. He's like the anti-mentor. He says, don't go. And often when you say don't go to someone, that's like saying go, especially for a kid. She really wants to get the ring, so she steps over the threshold, goes into the graveyard. Her dad's warned her never to go into the necropolis, the city of the dead, because there are kidnappers who might kidnap a freeborn boy or girl, rumors of half-wild dogs running around, and if you believe in ghosts and evil spirits, they would be in the graveyard. But she really wants to get her dad's ring, so she's following the magpie through the trees, past the tombs. Finally, she sees him popping up from an old oak tree. His beak is empty. When he flies away, she runs to the tree, climbs up it, and sure enough, when she gets to the magpie's nest, she finds the chain that she used as bait, her dad's ring, and yay, that's what she was going for. And she suddenly has a revelation. I'm a good detective. I'm good at this. And then she thinks, I wonder if there's any other treasure in the nest. And sure enough, at the very bottom, a gold and emerald earring worth at least 3,000 pounds in today's money, 600 sesterces, or 6 gold coins. And she's going to, next day, she's going to sell that earring and use the money to buy a poor enslaved girl from Africa about her age to save her from a fate worse than death. But in the meantime, so I used a version of the hero's journey to write that chapter called The 7 Plot Beats. And this is a simplified version. Instead of 22 steps, it's got 7 and super fast because I'm going to run out of time. You always start with your hero has a problem. The problem's the thing they know about. The need is the thing they need to learn. So Flavia's problem is someone stolen her dad's signet ring, and she needs to learn how to live a better life, let's say. Step 2 is the desire. This is the engine of your story. And in a good story, you will know when the hero gets the desire will solve the problem. So if her problem is someone stolen her dad's ring, the desire is for the ring. Now, step 3, one that people often leave out of a story, is the opponent. We don't like conflict, but stories like conflict. And the opponent can be evil, like Voldemort or He Who Must Not Be Mentioned from Harry Potter. Or it could just be a bird who likes bright, shiny things, as in this story. That's the beginning of the story. Those 3 steps set up your story: the problem, the desire, the opponent, or the scene even. The middle of the scene or the story is one step. Your hero has to come up with a plan to defeat the opponent to get the desire to solve the problem, and the plan almost always involves a journey. That's the middle of your story. The end of your story is the battle where your hero and your opponent finally clash to see who's going to get the desire, the thing, the goal. And whether they get it or not, they sometimes get some knowledge. So the knowledge is more important because the knowledge is what the hero needs to learn to live a better life. I'm a good detective, and the prize is what they wanted. I want the ring. Whether they win or lose the battle, they might get this knowledge and they might still end up on a higher level. So Flavia has ended up on a higher level because she's up the tree, she's found her dad's ring, realized she's a good detective. But I can't leave it there because no one would read on. And that's just the end of the first chapter. So I have to give her another problem. And so she hears this panting sound and looks down and see her tree is surrounded by wild dogs. So now she's got a problem again. So these 7 plots of a good story don't just take up the whole story, they take up every scene, and they're like a mini hero's journey. Her new problem is she's up a tree surrounded by wild dogs. Her desire is to get down without being eaten. Her opponent is, of course, the dogs. Her plan is a simple one: to yell for help. Plot beats, these are really important, and you often see them in movie titles. For example, a problem, Frozen; a desire, Finding Nemo; the opponent, Jaws; the plan, How to Train Your Dragon; battle, The Hunger Games, or Infinity War. Many battles appear in the titles of films. The knowledge, not so much, because you want to kind of hide that. And Coco isn't really giving too much away. And Sing, a movie with about 8 protagonists who all end up on a higher level. Every story needs a hero, but as I tell kids, your hero does not have to be an adult white guy like Achilles, James Bond, Hercules, Superman, Sherlock Holmes, or Mandalorian. And I learned this from looking at some of my favorite movies, that your hero can be anybody. And they often have about 3 sidekicks. So I kind of came up with my own little idea that the hero can be female or male, old or young, have special powers or no powers at all. But they have a problem, a desire, and they go on a journey. In my Roman mysteries, Flavia is the hero. Her special power is her brain. She's also impulsive and impetuous, which is her Achilles heel, but the good side means she's decisive and determined. And because I thought I'll have 4 characters, I thought I'd give each one of them one of the 4 elements the Romans thought the world was created out of: air, water, fire, and earth. Now, the hero often collects helpers. And the first one they collect is the faithful sidekick, their best friend, who has gifts that are different from the heroes, but complement the heroes. So they're a good team together. And in adult films or films for older people, it's often the boyfriend or the girlfriend. C3PO is, sorry, R2D2 is Luke's little faithful sidekick. Ron is Harry's faithful sidekick. Kristoff is kind of the love interest, and Sam is very faithful sidekick to Frodo. In my books, the beautiful enslaved girl Nubia is Flavia's faithful sidekick, and her element's fire. She comes from the desert, so she has golden eyes and wears a mustard yellow tunic. The funny one is a character who brings a little lightness into your story, and they can be the same as the faithful sidekick. You can do mix and match, or 2 people like Pippin and Merry from Lord of the Rings. Notice, good artists copy, great artists steal, said Pablo Picasso. There's C3PO, a total steal of the Tin Man. In my books, Jonathan, who's Earth, he's the funny one. He's steady and grounded. Get it? He's grounded. He has brown hair and brown eyes like the Earth, but brown's a boring word, so he wears a nutmeg colored tunic, and he's funny, got a dry sense of humor. And the wild one, now if the hero is often part god and part human and more than a human, the wild one's less than human and often part animal or completely animal. And when the hero first meets the wild one, they think they're the opponent, but they then find they can be an ally or a helper. And but because the wild one has aspects of an animal, they often betray the hero, as Gollum does in Lord of the Rings. And my wild one, Lupus, a little half-wild beggar boy whose name means wolf, who has no tongue so can't speak, he betrays his friends in the first Roman mystery, but by the second one, he's learning to read and write and becomes civilized. And he writes his first word on a wax tablet, volcano. Now, there's one more archetypal character, as well as those four I identified, who doesn't go on the quest with the hero, but sends the hero on the quest. And that's the mentor, often a wise wizard or older person who says to the hero, "You must go on a quest." And the hero goes, "I can't, I don't know how, I'm too young." And the mentor goes, "Teach you, I will. Train you, I will. Give you a talisman, I will." And so the mentor often gives the hero an object that shows they're called on the quest. Here are some famous mentors. They appear at the beginning of the story, tell the hero where to go, give them a talisman. Glinda gives Dorothy the ruby slippers. Chiron gives Percy Riptide, the pen that makes into a sword. Obi-Wan, my favorite mentor, gives Luke his dad's lightsaber. Gandalf gives Frodo the most famous talisman in 20th century literature, the ring. And notice the mentor is often a man with a beard, but not always. So here is a classic hero, talisman, and mentor from a film that's nearly 50 years old. And here's one from a film from last year. It's a really popular trope borrowed from Greek mythology. Now, halfway through, well, sorry, won't get there yet. The mentor encourages the hero to leave their ordinary world and cross the threshold into the world of adventure. And this is a really fun step when the hero leaves their ordinary world and goes into the world of adventure. Now, in Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, you all know when Dorothy leaves Kansas and goes into a black and white tornado, drops her into Technicolor Munchkin Land. In Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter film, when does Harry leave his ordinary world and go into the world of adventure? By crossing a kind of threshold? When he pushes his trolley by faith into platform 9 3/4, a brick wall. Mr. Carl Fredricksen lifts off with 1,000 helium balloons. This is often the most visually exciting step in a film, when Wally literally leaves his world, when Mary Poppins drops in, when they go into hyperspace. In Stranger Things, when they go to the underworld, and I'm coming to that in a minute. I tell kids, when you see a hand on a doorknob or a foot on the threshold or a welcome mat or the bottom of a door, yell out threshold as loud as you can, even if you're in the cinema. And even Taylor Swift knows about the steps of a good plot. And she has many crossings of the thresholds in her films, as I'm sure you can find. Now, the Romans knew about thresholds, and they believed that these were very powerful places because they thought evil spirits and demons clung, invisible ones clung to the doorway. And if you didn't go through the right way, they could make you sick. This is because the Romans lived in a world full of gods and spirits. And the reason they thought the world was full of gods and spirits is it was a filthy world, unhygienic, and they didn't know about bacteria, germs, and virus, so they thought something invisible must make you sick. That's why they have a mosaic of a scary dog at the threshold, where we have a welcome mat at the threshold, not just against burglars, but against evil spirits. Now, the more I've been studying about evil spirits and the way the Romans think, I think evil spirits were like this. They were like mischievous kids who you can't kill. You can frighten them away or you can distract them, but you can't kill them. So a scary dog would frighten them away. So would a snake. And these are actually called agathodaimones, good demons. You find them all over Pompeii with a little altar because there are no poisonous snakes in Italy. So snakes were good because they scared away the evil spirits. That's why women wore snake jewelry, to keep evil spirits away from their personal thresholds or portals, their eyes, their nose, their ears, their mouth. Staring faces keep away evil. Have you ever wondered why there's so many sculptures of masks? And people say, oh, it's because the Romans liked the theater. Well, really? Is that why? I don't think so. And you find them on oil lamps. You find them on little tiny terracotta clay talismans. You find them on stone um, busts. You find them on mosaics. These are to frighten away evil. And I discovered that there actually is a name for it. When I was translating Aesop's fables, I came across one fable called The Fox and the Mormalukion. The people of ancient times had many images designed to keep away evil. One of them was a Mormalukian, an actor's mask so scary that it could frighten off demons and other evil spirits. That's my bit. But then the actual Greek starts late one night. A fox was passing through a deserted sculptor's workshop when she chanced upon a marble Mormalukian in the form of a tragic mask. At first she recoiled, for in the silvery moonlight, its grimacing mouth and empty eyes were truly terrifying. Then, looking closer, she said, "This scary face has nothing behind it, just like some men who are all bark and no bite." But back to the hero's journey. I'm just going to finish by telling you quickly about three really fun hero's journeys. And the first is my favorite ancient Greek hero, Roman hero, sorry, Aeneas. Well, he's both. I love Aeneas. Most people think he's boring because he's pious and dutiful. I think we need a bit more dutiful people in today's world. And one reason I love him is this fresco from Pompeii, which makes him look really good looking. He's being really brave as someone's extracting a barbed arrowhead from his leg, and his little boy Ascanius is crying. And here comes his mother, Aphrodite or Venus, with a herb that will help take away the pain. So, like most Greek heroes, one parent's divine and one is human. And he crosses a threshold when he leaves burning Troy. You all remember how the Greeks beat the Trojans. They used the Trojan horse, which isn't again told in the Iliad, but rather best told in Virgil's Aeneid in Latin. And he even talks about four times at the very threshold of the gate. Threshold, yell it out. Aeneas has to leave his hometown and find a new Troy. And he's going to go on a hero's journey, and he's eventually going to end up in Italy, where he will found what will one day become Rome. Now, the amazing thing to me is that the hero's journey is on a coin of Julius Caesar. This is a silver denarius with Venus on one side, because Caesar claimed that his great 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 grandfather was Aeneas, so therefore his great 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 grandmother was Venus or Aphrodite. There she is, the mentor. She's the one who tells Aeneas he's got to go. And there's Aeneas with the talisman. It's the little Palladium, the statue of Athena, and his old dad on his shoulders. That's a whole story. You know that story. And look, they've even done the threshold right there. Amazing, on a coin of Julius Caesar. Halfway through every story, the hero visits death. And in the Aeneid, as I'm sure you know, the first 6 books of the Aeneid are based on the Odyssey, where he sails around, and the second half are based on Homer's Iliad, where he battles. Halfway through, exactly in book 6, he goes to the underworld, and his new mentor is the Sibyl, who gives him the golden bough. And he must now cross the threshold, past the threshold guardian, Cerberus, and get some advice from his father. Paddington is the same story as Aeneas. I hope you've all seen this film that came out 10 years ago, but was my favorite film of 2014. Paddington has the same problem as Aeneas. He must find a new home because his home in darkest Peru has been destroyed. Now, can you think about who Paddington's mentor would be and what the talisman would be? If you said his Aunt Lucy, you were right. And she gives him the hat that used to belong to the explorer and then his uncle Pestuzo, and says you must go to London, where you'll be assured of a warm welcome. And it's the best kind of talisman. It has a marmalade sandwich for emergencies. Now, the makers of this film, Paul King and Simon Farnaby, the writers, realized it's such a fun step, crossing the threshold, that they decided to put in some mini crossings of the threshold, like where he goes from a wet world to a dry world, or through the film strip, like Alice Through the Looking Glass for One Last Farewell to darkest Peru, or even where he literally crosses a threshold into the Brown's house, because this is his new desire. He wants to live not just in London, but with the Browns. And they even give him halfway through a visit to death. Just like Aeneas has to go to the underworld, Paddington must go to the underground. Now, I don't know if you remember when you first went on the underground when you were a little kid. It's quite scary. It looks like you're going down to Hades. But at that moment, he gets a kind of mentor and a kind of talisman. His mentor, if you remember, is the sign that says dogs must be carried. And the talisman is the dog. We just cut to him with the dog. And the music, James Brown, I Feel Good. Now that's what the talisman does. It gives the hero confidence. We find out later where he gets the dog, but it's so funny. Sometimes, of course, when the hero crosses a threshold, there are barriers, things that are going to want to stop you. So I know I've almost run out of time. I'm just going to super quickly tell you about one last hero from my new Pantheon book. Thank you, Natalie Haynes, for a really nice quote. By the way, she doesn't mention anything about the book. She just says, I love Caroline Lawrence. And actually, she was working on this. I was working on this and I didn't realize she'd just written um, Divine Might, which I highly recommend, about Greek goddesses. At least I have some gods in mind. Persephone, super quick, obviously follows the steps of a hero's journey. She starts off in her ordinary world, gathering her rosebuds where she may. And then suddenly she gets a call to adventure, or you might say a problem, when Hades or Pluto abducts her. Now, this is a terrifying tomb painting from 4th century BCE from Macedonia. And it shows, although it's faded, you can see there's the bearded Pluto in his chariot dragging off poor Persephone. And must have been horrific. Here's the famous sculpture of Persephone by Bernini when he was only 23 years old. Amazing. Look at the way Hades' hand seems to sink into her flesh, even though it's marble. And he's even done her tears. But you know what? It's not always a terrible thing when Persephone's abducted. Oh, by the way, here's a modern film based on the myth of a girl abducted. It's not always a terrible thing when she's abducted. And for example, on this beautiful volute crater in the British Museum, Persephone doesn't look at all upset to be with Hades. She looks pretty excited right there, and he looks very nice. And they've got their arms around each other, and there's Hermes going, yeah, it's going to be all right. And I think because a lot of these vases were from tombs, the parents wanted to console themselves with the fact that maybe their daughter who died in childbirth or something, maybe things weren't too bad. And on this beautiful kylix in the British Museum, you can actually see they're gazing at each other. Very important eye contact in ancient Greek vases. And her name, Persephata, a variation of the name Persephone, and he's Pluton, Pluto. She, of course, eats a pomegranate seed. You say, no, she eats 6. Well, it's disputed. And in my new book, I talk about how many pomegranate seeds she eats. And of course, this is a popular subject for ancient art. I'm just going to finish with an amazing excerpt from a poem my friend Emily wrote. And this just won the Classical Association Prize for a best poem. And she's written a poem about Persephone. Now you can do this too. You could take an ancient myth and just retell it using these steps. Oh, here's the return of Persephone. She's coming up out of the earth on the left, and there's Hermes the psychopomp, her guide, and Hecate with her torches guiding her up, and Demeter, her mother, who she's going to embrace. Because remember, she ate the pomegranate seed and she has to go back to the underworld for part of the year, but she can come up to the earth for the other part. Here's a little bit of the poem Emily wrote. I'm going to finish with this. She called it Pluto's Wife in Transit. And it starts off like this: Hades had me by the hair, should have cut it. Mother told me to cut it. His breath wilted my bouquet of wildflowers. His horse's eyes rolled like wheels of flame. The earth bled lava as he pulled me down into the incision he had made. Where was my head then? And it goes on for a while. Amazing imagery. And then a little bit I really loved. I'm not giving away the end, but here's a bit nearer the end. I climb aboard the ferry to my lower home. The first time I got the royal treatment, chariot and horses on the quaking earth. Now I take public transport. The crowds are endless. The ferryman unpleasant. We nearly capsize when the unburied grab hold, longing for an unreachable shore. And I won't tell you how it ends, but you can click that link or you can put in that link and read the whole poem. So I would like to thank Emily, there she is, as Persephone, for letting me use that poem. I would like to thank my lovely editor, Ellie Corbett. We went to see Hades Town, by the way, another story based on a Greek myth, not Persephone and Pluto, but Orpheus and Eurydice. And I'd especially like to thank the amazing Flora Kirk, who I went to see the Rossettis at the Tate with a while ago, for doing amazing illustrations. And thank you so much for bearing with me for nearly over 45 minutes. I can now take some questions. And I think I might let Helen just read out any she particularly likes, any questions she particularly likes.
Thank you so much indeed, Caroline. That was just fabulous. I did see some questions in the chat. I'm just gonna have a look here. But before I do, I have a question. Did they give you a part in the Roman mysteries?
Yeah, I did get a bit part. I got to be a Roman lady on the beach when Simon Callow, as Pliny the Elder, not Simon Cowell, but Simon Callow, who is in Room with a View, you all know, and he does the wonderful one-man plays of Dickens and stuff. He was playing